What's up, Commanders? CM Burny here. Thanks for tuning in once again to the briefing room. While you listen, you'll also be able to check out the making of the Sphinx by one of our artists on the team. We hope you enjoy, and we look forward to hearing your reviews. So let's get started. Welcome back to Burny's briefing room, Commanders. We have a community favorite joining us today. He's the lead engineer on War Commander and a master of all things coding. You may have seen him recently on the War Commander forums, helping you guys out with some loading issues, lag, and other performance problems that you may see in game sometimes. So please welcome FriendlyFixer to the briefing room.
Hi.
Hey, FriendlyFixer, how's your day going?
It's going great. I'm happy to be here.
Great, yeah, we're happy to have you. So why don't we just get right into it? So we don't have too much time today, unfortunately, but can you kind of briefly go over your responsibilities, on the team?
Until recently, I was a staff engineer, and my day job was writing code. Some people called me the staffiest of engineers, or his staffiness. We like to make fun with titles. It's like, lets the day go by.
Mm-hmm.
I worked on some features, but a lot of the time I was working on securing some of the nastier cheats. Now I am the lead engineer, and I spend a lot more of my time organizing the rest of the engineering team. That includes writing specs, triaging bugs, and investigating some of the nasty live issues. And also generally making sure the game doesn't just turn itself off.
Awesome. So what was the craziest cheat that you were able to destroy?
Well, my favorite one was I was asked to make the armory free, and discovered that it already was if you wanted it to be, that our client was sending the cost along to the servers, and the server was blindly trusting it. And then I dug into that and discovered that, well, surprisingly, so did a lot of the rest of the game. So that one was kind of fun. Killing the fact that the client was authoritative over your gold cost for things. I'm happy to say that is no longer true.
Oh my gosh. How long does it take to fix something like that?
Well, it really depends on identifying what is going wrong in the first place. Once that's found, often the fix is trivial. It's finding it. It's finding exactly what's going on and where the data is either being changed or is wrong in the first place.
Mm. Very interesting. Okay. So is Flash really that bad of a platform for a game like War Commander? Like, what do you think is the biggest cause of performance issues in game? Is it Flash, or is it, more stuff on our end?
Well, you've got two questions there, so I'm going to answer them separately. First, I'll talk about Flash. It was the ideal platform for War Commander. It let people connect from basically any browser. They could just log on, play the game, not download things, and just go. But times have changed. I mean, smartphones weren't a thing 7 years ago, and now all of a sudden everyone's got them in their pocket. People want to increasingly play the game on phones and tablets. And over time, Flash has made less sense. However, Flash is still a great platform. I really like it. It's fast to develop for. It has a lot of really cool built-in features. And I wish we were able to take advantage of some of those more. Instead, though, we will probably start looking for ways to get off of Flash. Sorry. Second thing you asked there, performance. It's kind of vague. It can mean a number of things. It could be battle lag, it could be world map, or even loading times for the game. And really the crappy part is we have all of those, and they come from different causes. The most important one to me, though, is battle lag. And the causes could be three different things. It could be the battle server's locations in the world and how you connect to them. It could be the battle server's code and how it is processing all of the battles and units you're throwing around. Or it could be the client's rendering performance and simulation speed.
So what do you think, out of those three is like the most important one for you to kind of focus on in your day-to-day?
The only ones I can really make the largest effect on is the battle server stuff. Client, we can make it more performant, but if someone is playing on an older computer, there's only so far we can take it. And we are also up against limitations of Flash itself. Its rendering technology is CPU based. It doesn't even use the graphics card in your computer. You could have the best graphics card on the planet and Flash doesn't give a care.
Oh, really? So when players are, talking about, buying new computers for War Commander, you don't recommend them like getting a, expensive GPU?
Not for War Commander, no. There are a couple of things that Flash could do towards GPU rendering. It does include a rudimentary 3D engine in the later versions. However, they don't have full browser support. They're not supported at all in Linux. And they present a lot of problems with rendering other content on the web page. And since our game is in Facebook, we do have some constraints around how we render it on a page.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think is the most important piece of hardware then for a player to have to play War Commander optimally?
That would be the CPU. Since everything in Flash is CPU bound, it paints pixels, it crunches ActionScript code, and all of that goes through your central processor.
Awesome. I think we were going to go more into some hardware stuff a little later on, so we can move on a little bit here. Yeah, so on the forums, I get a lot of complaints about lag and just kind of general performance stuff, especially during the monthly events. That's when it seems to hit us the hardest. But what kind of stuff have we done to address those issues in the past, and do we have any more plans for that going forward in the near future?
Any real-time strategy game needs to have good performance. Our players and I are in complete agreement there. In the past, we focused on targeted fixes in order to improve performance. Things like rendering optimizations in the client, loading time reductions, network messaging improvements. We do this because, quite frankly, a complete rewrite of the game is not possible. It is a very large game, and some of the behavior is not actually explicitly set out. It is intrinsically linked with the way the code was written. And sometimes the way that code is written is causing a performance problem. If we fix the performance problem, we change the way the game behaves, which understandably, when players have become really reliant on units behaving a certain way, pathing a certain way, that very much constrains some of our options for changing. Therefore, targeted fixes. Each one helps, but there's no smoking gun. It's a death by 1,000 cuts kind of thing. As for plans of the future, I definitely have plans. Unfortunately, some forum members generously offered to hold on to them for me, and I may or may not have lost them.
That's not good.
Seriously, though, we are planning on working on battle loading times and improving the communication speed between the battle server and the client. As well, we're going to be improving map spawning delays and another round of rendering improvements for the client.
Awesome. What kind of results do you expect to see from those kind of changes?
Well, ideally, I'd like to bring the average frame rate up. We do have some analytics in our game around measuring players' frame rates when they enter battles, when they do things in battles, when they leave a battle, and it is lower than I would like. Our game is supposed to be rendering at 30 frames per second, and our average is closer to around 24. And some players with decent computers, mind you, are seeing frame rates as low as 9 and 12. So clearly, we need to do some improvements on the rendering.
Do you think that has a lot to do with, the more animated buildings? Because I know sometimes I try to, live load players' accounts when they have issues, and I'm trying to see it on my end. And sometimes it takes me forever just to load into the game and see their account, and it seems like it's because of all the animated buildings and all the stuff, going on in their base. Yeah,
so that's actually a tiny bit my fault. The reason you're seeing animated buildings behave worse now is because I made the rest of the game better when I first joined the company. We had a very low performance across the board. And using a technique in Flash that is called cache as bitmap, it allows us to take things that don't change and cache them as an in-memory bitmap so that when it's rendering, it does it much, much faster. The problem is anytime you change anything, it has to invalidate the bitmap and re-render parts of it. And animated buildings changing quite frequently will mean they have to change parts of that bitmap. Flash has a constraint where it only allows you to have 3 dirty regions or rectangles on the screen that have changed. And if you have 3 small ones, it'll happily just change the 3 small. If you have 4 small ones, it will arbitrarily merge 2 of those into a larger region and have to re-render everything inside that region. So animated buildings that intersect a lot of walls are particularly bad because now you've got animated buildings and a ton of walls that have to be re-rendered.
Oh, wow. I never knew that about Flash. That's crazy.
It may be more detailed than people wanted, but I could go on about this stuff.
Are there any hacks or anything cool you can do to try to mitigate that or, work around it? Or is that just part of the just natural order of how Flash is made?
There's a number of things that we can try and do that we are going to be working on. One in particular that we would love to be seeing, but this has not made its way through our planning yet, but we're talking about possibly changing the way walls are done in the game. Instead of rendering them as 200 separate little individual sprites, we may try to bake them into more longer rectagonal regions.
So we always seem to be hit the hardest, kind of as I mentioned before, during our in-game events, like the monthly events. Do you think this is just caused by, having more players online hitting bases than normal, or do you think there's some, more underlying concerns or problems that kind of affect that?
It is very much because we have a lot more players. We currently have a naive load balancer for our battle servers, and as a result, sometimes the load is not correctly balanced across them. So some players may be having a perfectly fine time, and other ones may be put onto a battle server instance that has a little bit more load going on. That is something that we are actively developing to try and correct, put some proper load balancing across those. But there's not much players can do about it at the moment, and quite frankly, nothing I want them to do. I'd like them to keep playing the way they are so we can see where the load is and fix it, make it better for them. If players change their behavior, it's chasing a moving target.
Yeah, definitely. Are those battle servers tied to specific sectors?
They are not, actually. The battle servers are an interesting thing. They're one of the most dynamic parts of our game in the sense that we have some rather large servers, some very powerful servers that are running dozens of instances of our battle server code. And each battle server instance can run many battles on its own. So when we have 4,000 or 5,000 concurrent battles all going on, those are balanced across these large servers and the many instances they have.
Gotcha. Okay. So how many battles, on average do we see like at the start of an event where, we'll experience, more performance issues than normal?
Well, we will go into an event just before it starts at 10 a.m. and we may have about 100 to 200 battles on each battle server. Just before the event is a quiet time. Players are preparing themselves and not really doing very much. 10 o'clock hits and we go up to 800 or 900 battles per battle server.
Wow, that's a pretty big spike.
It is, yes.
And is the team monitoring the servers as the event goes live and, through the rest of the event?
Yes, we have a live dashboard that spits out statistics that we can look at in a graphical form. And it's actually quite fun to watch sometimes.
Yeah, I can imagine. So we talked a little bit about hardware earlier with, GPUs and CPUs. Do you have any other things you can mention with that? Like how can players get the most optimal War Commander experience? Can they do anything, on the software side?
Yes, there's a couple things that players can do. We're currently on Flash, and that is not changing immediately. There are plans definitely for us to be looking at alternatives. Flash is dying. Players know this. This is not a surprise or a contentious opinion. But while we're on Flash, a couple things that players can do. Playing in Facebook Game Room, if you are on Facebook, can help. Because when you're playing in a browser, you're sharing your memory and rendering performance with the browser itself. So that means your CPU is going to be sharing with other things. In addition to that, Flash has a virtual machine, and it shares it with all other Flash instances on that same page. And in some browsers, across the entire browser. So that means if you've got an ad or some other Flash game or some other thing going on that is Flash related, you're sharing that memory and CPU with our game. So trying to make it more dedicated, getting your whole computer dedicated towards the game, especially if you've got a less powerful one, that can help. If you're having rendering problems, then trying to get Flash to render less pixels is a good way to do that. You can do some things by turning off trophies, turning off some of the special effects in the game. You can play zoomed out because as weird as that seems, you're seeing more of the world. Well, each of the things are smaller, which means they're actually less pixels on the screen. And that's what ultimately matters. And from a networking perspective, if you're not actually having any performance problems in your client, because we are North American, having a good internet service provider is pretty critical. Less hops that you can make towards our battle servers on the West Coast, the less hops your data has to go through, the faster it gets there and gets back to you. So the better synchronous performance you'll get with the battle servers.
No, that's awesome. I think that's really good information. I don't think we've spread a lot of that to the community, so I'm excited for them to hear that and see if they can optimize their game a little bit more.
It's not all on them, though. I am fully aware that there's a lot of things that we're needing to do and are doing to try and improve this performance for players. In the meantime, those are some tips meant to try and help.
Definitely. We do see like new bugs pop up in game pretty frequently. Is this something that's like normal for games like ours? And why can't we just fix all of the bugs we have right now?
It's an interesting question, and I could spend an entire podcast just talking about bugs. Instead, I have a post that I'm writing about the life cycle of a bug. How does it live and die? It is a riveting read that I am sure will elicit the full range of human emotions. Until then, I want to leave you with the idea that this is a big game. There is a lot of code. And, surprise, some of it is not written very well. An example that I like to trot out is for targeting of units. There's a function called getTarget. It takes a parameter called force. This function is throttled in that it only does its work every 40 or so frames, just so we don't have the entire CPU of the battle server looking for targets. But if force is true, it will run the function now. And for some reason, the game had the value to true if you didn't have a target on that unit, which meant things with no current target ran the logic every single game frame. Well, I fixed that and immediately broke drones. Turns out that someone had baked in that drones only looked for targets when force was true. And that's the kind of stuff that's hard to predict. It's hard to know. So we could make this innocent change in some piece of the code and discover accidentally that, holy crap, we just broke something. Our game is 7 years old. Things always don't make sense, and they connect in very non-obvious ways. And as a result, mistakes are really, really easy to make. We have a saying, actually, on the dev team, and it's, why did it break? Because War Commander.
So, just out of curiosity, how many lines of code are there in War Commander?
There are over 10 million lines of code spread across the entire code base. The code is not written in one language. In fact, we have ActionScript in the client. We have C and C++ in our battle servers, which is transpiled into ActionScript through a utility called Crossbridge. We have JavaScript, PHP, Python. We have Scala and Java in our world map servers. I'm sure I'm missing a couple in there. Oh, right. We have a templating library called Jinja Templates for our data pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
A lot.
I understood a few of those words. So you had a thread previously on the forums that was pretty popular among the community about, loading issues that were kind of popping up more and more a few months ago. Have we seen any kind of progress on that front since that thread you made?
Honestly, not a lot. There is work underway to tease apart the login process and how we load data in our battle engine, but it's not ready for release. Unfortunately, that system is old, has not been touched in many years, and breaks if you look at it wrong.
Just like me. Do we have any sort of estimated time for that fix?
I do not that I can share.
Okay, fair enough. So looks like we're running out of time, unfortunately, but do you have any final thoughts, for the players tuning in?
I do. Some of you can be rather negative on the forums, and that's okay. We're all adults, and we can handle it. But there's a few things I'd like you to keep in mind. Everything we do is not designed to rip players off or target them in any way. Please continue to call us out on any bugs you find. Just maybe refrain from demanding that we all get fired. Trust me, you don't want that. As I said, this is a big game. New people have very little chance of grasping it right away. Agreed.
I second that. Awesome, FriendlyFixer. Thank you for joining me today on Burny's briefing room. It was great to have you here, and I think we learned a lot. Some stuff went right over my head because I'm not technically savvy like you, but I'm sure the players will take a lot out of this podcast. So thank you for being here.
I hope they do.
All right, everyone. I am CM Burny signing off. Have a good day in the sector.